Thanks so much for joining us today. As Wanika said, my name's Joan Peterson. I work with an organization called Bluepoint Leadership Development. Super excited. For those of you who are at the first of our series, we looked at this question. We looked at, well, what would it be like if we could positively impact our effectiveness, well-being, and the quality of our relationships? And what would it be like if we could do that with others as well? For those of you who didn't have an opportunity to join us, you can get a recording of that first one. And really what we'll look at today is that same question. How can we positively impact effectiveness, well-being, productivity? And while we looked at it through the lens of resilience and emotional intelligence the last time, today we'll look at it through the lens of coaching. What are some of the ways that I, as an HR professional, can either create or sustain or build a coaching culture so that I can, again, transform teams and transform organizations? A little bit about Bluepoint for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We're a leadership development organization. We're a sister brand of HCI, and we work with leaders all over the world in and on topics like coaching, like emotional intelligence, like leading change, leading innovation, and et cetera. We work with leaders in teams. We work with leaders organizational-wide. We work with leaders one-on-one through workshops, customized or off the shelf, and through one-on-one executive coaching. I've been in the leadership development space for a lot of years. Super excited to be able to share some best practices, some tips. So my hope is as you spend time with us today, you'll walk away with, well, what are some of the things that I can use for myself as a leader, as an HR professional, as a coach? What are some of the things I can bring back to help the leaders in my organization be more coach-like? And what are some of the things that I might be able to do in order to start to either develop or to continue to build a coaching culture inside my organization? One of the pieces of research that I oftentimes, at least lately, have been introducing to organizations is that this comes from Gartner Research. In 2016, they looked at, on average, how many changes do organizations, how many enterprise-wide changes took place inside organizations? Again, 2016, too. And then the most recent data, which you see on this slide here, is now it's up to 10. So we've gone from 2 to 10 in the span of 2016 to now. And the organizations that I work with, they're like 10 seems awfully small. Like we tend to be on the upper end of that average. And while I think that's interesting data, what I think is even more interesting is they looked at, well, what's employee willingness to support the change? And how has that changed from 2016 until now? And in 2016, employee willingness to support the change was in the 70s. It was 74%. And what we know is that now, of course, that number has gone down significantly. It's gone to 38%. So if you think about what today's challenge looks like, we're in a world that continues to change at a very rapid pace. And what we see inside organizations is that employee willingness to support the change, employee buy-in to the change has significantly gone down, whether it's by change fatigue or whether it's on burnt out. And I share that data with a lot of the leaders that we work with. And I ask this question, well, do you think that leadership has an impact on that 38%? Do you think leadership matters? Do you think if there was different leadership, if leaders were behaving in a different way, that 38% would be increased? And of course, everyone says yes. And really, that's why we're here today. Our bias when we look at this idea of leadership is that leadership happens one conversation at a time. So if leadership can impact productivity, effectiveness, well-being, et cetera, it can impact that small percentage. And leadership happens one conversation at a time. What can I do as an HR professional, as a leader, as a coach? How can I help leaders inside my organization have better conversations? How can I make the conversations that I have every day matter? And one of the questions that I'm going to ask you as well, I ask the leaders that I work with, how many conversations do you have every day? Now, I know that the polling, the Slido polling Q&A, the chat pod, many of you started to put in the location where you're calling from. I'm going to ask you to use that really as an opportunity to interact with each other. So grateful that you're putting in your locations. Love that we have individuals from all over the world. And so throughout the course of the webinar, I'll ask you some questions. I'll ask you to, or I'll invite you to put your responses in the chat pod so that you can see the kinds of challenges. What are some of the things that you're seeing work for each other inside that chat pod? And the first question I'm going to ask you to put in, just so you can get a sense for who's in the room, is how many conversations do you think you have every day? That is one-on-one team meetings. Maybe it's a Teams meeting or Zoom meeting, whether it's a Slack message, whether it's text messaging. How many conversations do you believe you have every day at work on an average day? And again, I'll invite you to put that into the chat pod there. And I'll share with you what I typically hear. So inside North America, and maybe this resonates with those of you who are from North America, I typically hear anywhere from 25 to, Joan, I can't count that high, right? So we hear anywhere from like 25 to hundreds and hundreds of conversations. As we move outside of North America, sometimes that number goes down a bit. So let's get to think about, okay, how many conversations do I have? And then the second question that I'm going to invite you, and again, I appreciate folks chiming into the chat pod, which I think is even interesting, is like, okay, if you look at those conversations, whether it's, I see a lot of 50 or more, I see 5 to 10, I see lots of different numbers. Even as you think about, even if I have as few as 5 or as many as hundreds, how many of those conversations would you say are meaningful? That is, the other person leaves better in some way. They leave inspired. Maybe they leave with a piece of feedback. Maybe they leave encouraged or challenged. Maybe they leave feeling a sense of accomplishment or pride. Maybe they leave with an appreciative compliment. Maybe they leave with a piece of constructive feedback. How many would you say, percentage-wise, of the conversations that you have, would you say are meaningful? Again, that's a question that I ask of leaders all over the world. And I hear lots of different answers. I hear the tongue-in-cheek, well, Joan, that's 100% of my conversations. And then they kind of laugh. My belief is none of us, nor should we have 100% of our conversations are meaningful. I think many of us need to have, there are many conversations we need to have that are transactional. I do believe that many of the conversations that we have, we make transactional, where we could really be thoughtful about having more meaningful conversations. And that's the intention of today. How can I move that percentage a bit? Not just for me, but how might I move that percentage a bit, the meaningful conversation percentage a bit for the leaders inside my organization, for my team, maybe for the organization itself. And we'll look at that through 3 lenses. And really, that's what our agenda is today. First, we'll look at it. Well, why does it matter? Like, why is it important for me to engage in coaching conversations that matter? And then we'll look at, well, what does great coaching look like? And we'll ask you to think through, what does that look like? And how do I show up? And the last piece we'll look at is really, what are some of the things that I can do to either build or nourish a coaching culture inside my organization? So let's start with that first piece around, well, why do this? Why does coaching matter? And I'll ask you to use that chat pod again. And tons of research around the benefits of coaching. What I'd love for you to share with one another is this, like, what have you heard? What have you seen? What are some of the things that you believe are the benefits of coaching inside an organization? What are the benefits to the person being coached? Maybe what are the benefits to the leader doing the coaching? What are the benefits to the team? What are the benefits to the organization? And again, I'll invite you to share some of what you've seen are some of the benefits in the chat pod, an opportunity for you to kind of hear from each other. I can share what some of the research, and I'll share what some of the research tells us, but I'd love to hear from you again, to share with each other in that chat pod around the benefits. When we looked at, if you look at what research is out there about why spend time building this coaching culture, what are some of the things that takes work to build a coaching culture. It takes work to build coaching skills. What we know is that there are tremendous benefits from doing that. And we've just listed a few here, and my guess is as you start to put those in the chat pod, you'll identify additional ones. There's a tremendous benefit to the individuals being coached. Yes, it's around engagement and productivity. We know the research tells us it increases performance. It boosts collaboration. Other things that I think are probably not as clear is that it does increase resiliency and adaptability. Like if I'm being coached, it helps me to be more adaptable, to think differently. As well, it improves innovation. If I'm starting to think of my own solutions, it helps tap into different perspectives on the team and inside the organization. It improves retention, tons of research supporting that piece around improving retention. It also cultivates trust and ownership. So it cultivates trust so that the person doing the coaching, the person being coached knows that they trust them. And it encourages accountability and ownership. And the person being coached takes ownership of whatever it is that that they're being coached on. So again, really grateful that you're putting it into the chat pod. Love that, Kayla. Increased psychological safety. You have the trust, engagement, increased performance, employees feeling valued. I mean, so many benefits to building this culture of coaching. And what many organizations say is, okay, so those are some of the soft skills. And I don't believe those are soft benefits. I think there are many hard benefits there. And ICF looked at the ROI of coaching, the International Coaching Federation, ICF, and they looked at the fact that there's a 70% increase in individual performance, 50% increase in team performance, and 48% increase in organizational performance. So again, when coaching is prevalent inside organizations, we see individual performance go up, as well as team performance and organizational performance. I'd like to share a couple of case studies. All three done in the healthcare industry, interestingly enough. And they were looking to coaching to really help them in different ways. And the first case study was looking at burnout. And is coaching a tool to counteract some of the characteristics associated with burnout? And as many of you, I'm sure, experiencing 70% of professionals have experienced work-related burnout in the past year. So Mayo Clinic, this was pre-pandemic. Their first study was done pre-pandemic. In 2019, they were looking at, okay, can we use coaching, or do coaches help mitigate some of the characteristics associated with burnout? And this is with mid-career physicians. And they found that there was a high burnout rate. There was a high sort of this exhaustion rate with mid-career physicians. And what's interesting about this study was they didn't have a tremendously long coaching engagement. So they did use Bluepoint Leadership Development's coaches. So they utilized our coaches, and the physicians were given 6 30-minute coaching sessions. So not a long engagement and not a long time. It wasn't this hour-long time where you have to be off the job. And what they found is that the group who had coaches, their emotional exhaustion decreased by 19.5%, and symptoms of burnout decreased by 17.1%. So pretty significant results. So that was pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, they did a similar study, also at the Mayo Clinic, similar kind of engagement, 30 minutes, only this time wasn't with mid-career physicians, it was with surgeons who were experiencing tremendous burnout, and they found the same results. So they published another report. It was in 2021, and that was the impact of coaching on surgeon burnout. So twice, they did 2 studies, one post-pandemic, one pre-pandemic, and they were looking at, can we, again, mitigate physician burnout utilizing coaching? The Cleveland Clinic didn't look at, so while Mayo Clinic used external coaches, Cleveland Clinic, and this was during the pandemic, they used internal coaches. So what they were looking to do is, can I make a coach available to our physicians at the Cleveland Clinic who were struggling with burnout during the pandemic, and will it make a difference? So what they found is one coaching session specifically related to COVID. And then they started to measure the results. And here's part of what they found. What they found is that, let me just pull this slide up. Over 160 physicians confirmed that coaching was a key factor in their decision to stay with the organization. And then they attached a dollar amount to it, $84 million in savings. So Mayo used external coaches, Cleveland Clinic used internal coaches. Their intention was around retention, where Mayo Clinic was around burnout. And then the third organization, called Halton Healthcare, it's a community healthcare organization in Canada. They were looking at retention as well, but they wanted to build coaching skills inside the organization with their physicians and nurses, as well as some of their administrative staff. And they were looking at development and retention. So they put together a leadership development program, utilizing some internal resources. They also tapped our organization to do some coach training. And then we as well trained their internal staff, physicians, nurses, administrative staff, to deliver coach training. So we did train the trainers there. And what's, again, fascinating was the results that they saw. They saw an increase in engagement, effectiveness, and capability in its leadership population as well among all participants in this program. Their turnover rates are more than 10 times lower than the rest of the organization. So again, interesting and a different strategy for how to use coaching to, for them, impact leadership development as well as retention. Little bit of an aside, I feel really fortunate that I was with that group and was able to do the train the trainer. So I'm in a room full of physicians, nurses, and administrative staff who have given up a day of their time to do a train the trainer. They had already been through our coach training workshop, and we were doing introductions. And one of the gentlemen in the room, who's a pediatrician, during his introduction, he said this. He said, "I am extremely busy, and I wanted and did not want to miss the opportunity to be trained to deliver this workshop." And then he went on to say, "Because when I took the workshop, I have become a better physician." He said, "My patients, who are children, of course, are better because of it." He said, "I'm so much better with their parents." And he said, "And I'm actually a better partner and a better parent because my coaching skills increased. And I don't want others inside this organization to miss that opportunity." I mean, phenomenal. So again, some hard and soft results, and looked at it differently than Mayo, than Cleveland Clinic. They looked to bring coaching skills inside their organization. So we know it matters, right? Tons of research that tells us it matters. So what does great coaching look like? And I recognize that many of you who are listening to the webinar are likely coaches, have massive experience around coaching. Like, just kind of level sort of the playing field around, okay, what does great coaching look like? One of the things that we typically ask our the individuals that we work with when we're looking to build coaching skills is we ask them to think about, who are the people who have been their greatest coaches? Who have been the people who have made an impact on them? Like, who would they consider their most, typically it's their best leader, their most coach-like leader? I'm going to ask you to think of the same. Like, who is this for you? Like, I think most of us have had experiences where we've had people in our lives who've made a difference. I ask you to think of those individuals for you. Like, what is it that they did? What is it that they said? What impact did they have on you? Like, who are the people who have made a difference for you, inside and outside work? And I of course ask this of leaders all over the world, and people talk about these individuals with whom they've interacted. Sometimes they're from childhood, sometimes it's a first boss, sometimes it's a current boss, sometimes it's a parent. So if you think about throughout the course of your life, who has made that difference for you? What did they do? What did they say? And what was their impact? And for me, there were few people. I've been blessed that I've had some wonderful coaches in my career. Actually have a formal coach now who has made a significant impact for me, and he coaches for a living. Early in my career, I would say the person who's made the biggest difference for me was one of my first bosses. And she did a lot of things, and to why I would choose her. One is I think she saw something in me early in my career. Like she believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She pushed me. She held me accountable. She helped me feel as if I could do things that I didn't think I was capable. She wasn't easy. I mean, she was tough. She gave some tough feedback, but was equally appreciative. So again, I'll ask you to think about what or who is that person for you? And what is it that they did, said? What was the impact? And again, that's a question that we ask of a lot of the leaders we work with. When we started to compile a list, and what's interesting is the lists look the same. So if you ask this question inside organizations all over the world, different industries, different parts of the globe, the lists of, well, what does great coaching look like? They look very similar. And my guess is as you look at this slide, the person that maybe you have in mind likely showed up like this. They encouraged you. They listened to you. Maybe they took a chance on you. The likelihood is they did confront you. They gave you some tough feedback. They challenged you. They invested in you. They cared about you as a person. They stretched you. They told you the truth. They saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself. And a couple of things was really interesting to us as we started to ask this question of leaders all over the world. One is that yes, the lists look the same. So that was sort of the first kind of like, and why I think that's important is we all know what great coaching looks like. We've been on the receiving end of it. So really, how can I, as a coach, as a leader, as an HR practitioner, how can I be more attentive and intentional about doing more of these? And how can I help those around me be more intentional about doing more of these? And that's the first thing we noticed is, okay, that the lists look the same. And then we started to look at, okay, what's not on the list? And that was interesting as well. So when people talked about their personal best coach, what they didn't talk about was they gave me great advice. They told me great war stories. They told me exactly what to do. And my guess is that all of our personal best coaches did all those things. The likelihood is they gave us advice. The likelihood is they were directive. But what we remember are these things. We remember that they challenged us. We remember that they stretched us, that they cared about us. We'll talk in a little bit about, okay, well, what's the difference and when do I give advice and when do I direct and when do I coach? Because that's a huge question that comes up in the workshops that we work with leaders around. I think here the important piece is this is what great coaching looks like. How can I get more of that inside the organization? And the other thing that I think is interesting about the list is it's two very different skill sets. That they listened to me, they cared about me, they saw something in me I didn't see in myself. There's the more the appreciative and the nurturing skills. And the other skill set is they confronted me, they challenged me, they stretched me, they told me the hard truth. It's the difficult conversation skill set. Many of us probably are more naturally gifted in one than the other. Probably easier for us to do one than the other. And what we know about the best coaches is they're able to do both. So I'll ask you just for a moment to look at this list and to think about those people around you. And as you think about those people around you, whether it's your team, whether it's outside work, whether it's your peers, maybe it's your boss, which of these characteristics would they want more of from you? Like which of these do you feel really good about? People would say I demonstrate that frequently. And which of these might you need to do more frequently? And I think that's the question we need to be asking around the organization as well. Like as you look around your organization, which of these might your leaders be really comfortable with? And which might they need to be more intentional about? So if that's what great coaching looks like, then how do I build a coaching culture? what are some of the things that I can do in order to nurture a culture of coaching inside my organization? One of the best definitions of culture, tribute to Jason Barger, he said, culture is the way we think, act, and interact. So if I'm looking to build a culture of coaching or nurture a culture of coaching, I really need to be looking at, okay, how are we thinking? Are we thinking in a coach-like way? Are we acting in a coach-like way? And are we interacting in a coach-like way? And being really attentive to that. One of my favorite quotes around culture is by a woman named Frances Hesselbein, and she said this, and then I'll talk about who Frances is. She said, "Culture does not change because we desire to change it. Culture changes when the organization is transformed. The culture reflects the realities of people working together every day." So to me, when I'm looking at starting to shift the culture, it starts with how are people acting, interacting, thinking, and are they thinking, acting, and interacting in a coach-like way? Now, Frances Hesselbein, many of you may or may not know her name. She led the Girl Scouts in the United States and North America at a time where it was really difficult to lead the Girl Scouts when it was kind of they hit some tough times. And you may know the name Marshall Goldsmith. He was asked, who do you think was the best leader ever? He said Frances Hesselbein. And he said when he asks some of the individuals whom he coaches, best leader ever, many point to Frances Hesselbein, even though she's not this tremendously well-known name. We lost her a while back. I think she lived till she was 99 or 100. And Marshall Goldsmith tells this story of Frances Hesselbein. He did some volunteer work, some pro bono work for the Girl Scouts of North America. And he said, so here I am on a weekend, because that was the only day I had free. And Frances had said, listen, if you are volunteering your time, we'll show up wherever you want. And they were at one of those sort of Girl Scout camps. And he said, like, I was leaving for a trip the next day, so I needed to get my laundry done. And I happened to say to her, like, where can I send my laundry out or get it done? Because I need to leave tomorrow. And she said, oh, no worries. Just leave it in a bag on your bed and it'll be taken care of. And he said, fine. He kind of left it in a bag in his bed. He went down to have breakfast. He was sitting with the other individuals who were going to be participants in the workshop that he was delivering. And one of them elbowed the other one. And he said, I followed their eyes. And there's Frances Hesselbein, head of the Girl Scouts of North America with his laundry bag. And he said, she's not. And they were like, oh, she is. And to me, thinking about culture and it's the realities of people working together every day. And that's how she lived her life, right? It's an opportunity for me to serve. It's an opportunity for me to show service. And that's the culture she was looking to build. So I just love that quote, especially when we think about, okay, if we're looking to build a culture, what are some of the things that we need to do so that the culture reflects the realities of what does it look like for people working together every day here? So when we look at this idea of culture, I like to look at it really from two lenses. That what a person sees in an organization with a coach, like with a coaching culture, and what an organization does to support a coaching culture. So let's start with that first one. So what do we see in an organization with a coaching culture? When I look around me, what do I see? And I'll invite you as I go through these to think about your own culture, whether that's your organization or your team. You get to choose what it is, but I'm going to invite you to think about, okay, would I say that's a characteristic or that's something I see around me? And the first, and there's 7 of them. The first is this: personal and organizational learning is greatly valued. So this is around this idea of, well, are we really holding leaders accountable for the performance, learning, and development of their team members? When I look around me, do I see the organization supporting and valuing learning? And do I see leaders supporting and valuing learning? So if we again ask ourselves that question, and quite often we hear this inside organizations, right? Human resources are our most important asset. Well, are we measuring that? Are we measuring this need for leaders to value that idea of learning and development. So again, when I look at my organization or I look around me, is that learning piece valued? That's the first characteristic. The second characteristic is that this idea that people are excited about their personal and professional development opportunities. Like, we know that not everyone on our team is going to be able to be promoted. And do I still see excitement from those around me that they feel as if they're being developed on a human level and on a professional level? And what we know in organizations with a coaching culture, we know that coaching is an act of faith in another person. So when I'm receiving coaching, I am developing as a human. I'm developing, I'm being able to be innovative. I'm thinking of my own solutions. So while, yes, we cannot have promotions for everyone, we can in organizations with a coaching culture. When we coach, people see that as an opportunity to be developed. The third characteristic, and this, I know it's triple barreled, you can't just have one. When I look around me inside the organization, do I see leaders as trustworthy, selfless, and competent? I mean, think about what coaching requires. Coaching requires me as a leader to want and to know how to coach you. And it requires you as an individual to want coaching from me. I don't get to be your coach because I'm your leader. I need to earn the right to do so. So with this is around, okay, have my leaders earned the right to coach, not just their team members? Have they earned the right to coach the team members? And have they earned the right to coach others up, down, and across the organization? Do we see our role as leaders as an opportunity to trust and be trusted, as an opportunity for people to see us as somebody who they want coaching from? Sometimes when I'm helping leaders inside organizations with coaching skills, what I hear is, Joan, I get that. I get that I need to coach my team. I get that my role as a leader is to coach my team. And then they say this, well, and I coach those who are coachable, but I have people on my team who are uncoachable. So kind of they say, well, tell me how to coach the uncoachable. And here's my belief, and I'll share my thoughts on this. I believe that most people want to add value inside an organization. I believe that most people want to succeed. I believe that most people want to be at their best at work. Every day we spend so much time at work. And because of that, I believe that most people want coaching. And if they show up as uncoachable, I wonder, do they just not want coaching from me? And I'll challenge you, and I challenge the participants that I interact with. If you have someone in your head that you believe is uncoachable, can you, for a moment, shine the light on yourself and say, is there something maybe that I'm doing that's causing them not to want coaching from me? And what might I need to do to better earn the right to coach? What might I need to do to show up as being trustworthy, selfless, and competent? The next characteristic is that promises are readily made and faithfully kept. This is about accountability. It's about taking ownership. And I think that's the wonderful part about coaching is, as the coach, I ask the talent, the person being coached, to take responsibility, to take ownership, and to own something. And when I look around me in organizations with coaching cultures, I see people step up. I see people take accountability. I see people making promises. And when things don't go well, I see people owning up to it, being really transparent about the fact that, yes, I didn't fulfill that commitment, and here's what I'm going to do about it. So again, another characteristic of a coaching culture is around that accountability piece. The fifth characteristic is this idea of difficult conversations, that difficult conversations are routine. What we see, again, inside organizations with coaching cultures is that people talk about what really matters. So it could mean I see something going on maybe in another area, and it just doesn't feel right to me. maybe I have some data or piece of information that I might not be right. And in organizations with a coach-like culture, we find people engage in those difficult conversations. They talk about things even if they don't know they're right. And sometimes it shows up as vulnerability. And again, what a coaching culture does is it builds that muscle to have difficult conversations so that people inside organizations talk about what really matters to the right person, like not kind of behind their back, not sort of having I think this is going wrong. They go right to the source. And to me, it brings up, of course, Brene Brown. If you want to talk about courage, if you want to talk about vulnerability, Brene Brown is you can't talk about either without talking about Brene Brown. And to me, this is how it shows up inside organizations. It shows up as courage. And she says courage is contagious. And to scale daring leadership and build courage in teams and organizations, we have to cultivate a culture in which brave work, tough conversations, and whole hearts are the expectation. And armor is not necessary or rewarded. So that's what we see inside organizations with a coaching culture. We see people step up, they have tough conversations, they're brave, even though they might not be right. They don't wear the armor to protect themselves. They're really looking to serve the organization in some way, to serve the other person in some way, to engage in a conversation that may not be easy, but it's the right thing to do. The sixth characteristic we see inside a coaching culture is that people delight in the success of others. This is around competition, I think, is healthy inside organizations, but what we see in coaching cultures is that yes, there's a healthy competition, but it also, what I see is that people do get excited for each other. Like if one of my teammates is successful, I celebrate that in some way. I delight and I'm appreciative in terms of the success of others. So when I look around me, do I see people really being happy for one another? And the last characteristic is well-intentioned feedback flows freely throughout the team or the organization. So a bit different, although I think it is a difficult conversation. This one's strictly about feedback. When I look inside the organization, do I see people giving feedback up, down, and across the organization? And I'd like to share, this is a brief checklist. And I'll ask you just to take a look at it now, because when I share this with leaders, I ask them to take a look at all 8 and to say, okay, which of these do you feel really good about? Which of these do you believe that you say, yeah, people would say I do that on a regular, frequent basis. It's natural strength for me. And then which of these maybe would those around you want more of? And I'll ask you just a moment to take a look at the list. And again, I'll invite you to use the chat pod here. As you look at the list, which of these would you say natural strengths of yours? You know, are you getting enough feedback? Are you confident in the quality? Do you ask for it? Do you receive it? Do you receive it well? And then what about the feedback for your team? Are you providing timely feedback? Do they receive that feedback well? And are you encouraging your team to ask for feedback from you and from others? So again, I'll ask you just to look at that list. Which ones for you do you feel really good about? And then which ones for you maybe are ones that you'd like to be more intentional about? You know, is there an opportunity for you to demonstrate any of these more frequently? I'll also invite you to take a look at this from an organization or a team perspective. Which of these do you think maybe your team might need to do more intentionally, that you might need to, as a leader, as an HR professional, to build inside the team or the organization? Extremely important in a coach-like culture for feedback to be the norm. And again, it's the appreciative piece, which was characteristic number 6, and the constructive feedback piece, which is characteristic number 7. So if we look at all 7 characteristics together, I'll ask you again to think about your organization. And as you look at these, and just for you, which of these might you want to spend more time on? Which of these do you think you need to be most attentive to as an HR practitioner? Maybe when you look at your team, is there anything you want to do differently? Is there anything you want to do more of or less of to build one or more of these characteristics? So again, that's what we see. We see those 7 characteristics inside organizations with a coaching culture. And the the next lens is, well, what does an organization do to support a coaching culture? Like if that's what it looks like, what are some of the things I need to do in order to support that? And what we know is that when a coaching culture takes hold, people throughout the organization integrate coaching approaches into everyday conversations. So we just see it. We see the 7 characteristics, and we see people really start to engage in conversations with anyone at any time. So if we look at some of the things that ICF has attributed to 6 components that shape a coaching culture. And again, this is ICF, International Coaching Federation, when they look at the 6 components about what an organization does. The first is this. What they know is that, again, what they see in organizations that shape, that have a coaching culture, employees value coaching. So this is not about the coach now. It's about the fact that coaching is welcomed. So employees inside the organization value coaching. As well, senior executives value coaching. So I kind of have, this is kind of top down and bottom up. Need to have both as these components that shape the coaching culture. Managers, leaders, and/or internal coaches receive accredited coach-specific training. So again, what ICF sees in terms of the 6 components that shape a coaching culture is they see coaches being developed inside the organization, whether it's teaching managers and leaders coaching skills or employing internal coaches who that's their primary role. They also see the organization utilizing 3 coaching modalities. They use internal coaches. If you think about those 3 case studies, that's what Cleveland Clinic used internal coaches. They use external coaches. Mayo Clinic tapped the external coaches. And they also build the skills of managers, leaders internally using coaching skills. And that's what Halton Healthcare did as well. The 5th is coaching has a dedicated line item in the budget. So again, as we start to build a coaching culture, is there money dedicated to this idea of a coaching culture? And the 6th is that all employees in the organization have an equal opportunity to receive coaching. And that coaching could look different depending on the level of the organization. But that regardless of where I am, I have an opportunity to receive some type of coaching. And again, 6 according to the ICF. What we know is that people will say to us, well, how do you drive a coaching culture? You can't really drive a coaching culture. What you can do is grow and nurture it. So if we look at, well, what are some of the things that we can do to grow and nurture a coaching culture? There are steps we can take to grow and nurture that culture. The first is this. We can develop coaching skills throughout the organization. Our belief is that coaching is everyone's business. So is there a way for me to develop coaching skills throughout the organization, whether it's bringing in coach training or designing something in-house that starts to develop these coaching skills up, down, and across the organization that starts to nurture a coaching culture, because I now have more skilled coaches inside the organization. The second is equipping leaders with an understanding of when to coach. And I think this is critical. Yes, it's important that people know sort of the how of coaching, but coaching is a tool, and it's not always the right tool. So one of the things that is extremely important in building a coaching culture is helping leaders recognize, well, when do I coach? And when do I do the other things that I do as leaders? When do I direct? When do I advise? When do I teach? When do I mentor? And when do I coach? And this is one of the slides that we use in our coach training. And I won't spend a ton of time on it, but it's extremely important for us to help leaders see that their role is to do all these things. And the best leaders know when to do each. Because when I direct, and the yellow and blue is this, like when I direct, I own the agenda. Like if I tell people what to do, and there are times where that's critically important, like me setting expectations, or if there's only one right way to do it, or I'm helping people in an urgent time, or again, that safety concern, I'm going to direct, but I own the agenda. I'm not passing a ton of capability. And if you go to the other end of the continuum, when I coach, really true coaching, I help the other person take the agenda. where it's their solutions, and again, you have compliance versus commitment there, where they own it, where they take accountability. That's where we see capabilities being met inside organizations. That's where we see all those benefits that we talked about right when we started the webinar. It's at that end of the continuum. But I need to learn, like, when do I direct and when do I share my subject matter expertise, and when do I coach? I think it's extremely important for us as HR practitioners, for us as coaches, as trainers, et cetera, to help people recognize in what situations do I do each of these. And in order for me to build a coaching culture, I need to help push people toward that coaching end of the continuum when appropriate. It's not about doing it all the time, but it's about pushing them to that end when it is appropriate. The third piece is enabling organizational access to coaching, whether it's using internal managers or leaders who are using coaching skills, whether it's using internal coaches or whether it's using external coaches. So again, how do I grow and nurture a coaching culture? I develop coaching skills. I help equip leaders with an understanding of when to coach. And then there's some organizational access, depending on the size of the organization, depending on the budget of the organization, lots of ways to do this, right? Whether it's building the skills internally and then enabling people to have access to those, whether it's employing external coaches at different levels inside the organization and then enabling organizational access to that. A couple of closing thoughts I think that are important to keep in mind when building a coaching culture. And the first is that really it's not this idea of I build this coaching culture. It's just another new program. Like we hear that all the time. Oh gosh, this is the program du jour. It's not that. What we know about coaching cultures is that it's a significant culture shift. It's a different way of looking at engaging in conversations. It's, it's not a formula either. Like I do this and then I say this and then I say that. What we know about coaching, yes, it is a way of doing. It's about being curious. It's about asking great questions. It's about helping the other person take accountability. But it's also about being. It's about earning the right to coach. It's about not only choosing to coach others in the organization, but it's about them wanting to be coached by me. So it's encouraging that piece around have the leaders inside the organization really thought about earning the right to coach, and do they lead in a way that others want coaching from them? I think the other important piece around coaching is recognizing that great coaching is a career-long journey. And as an executive coach, like there are some, and as a leader, there are some days that I lead well, and there are some days I do not, or I look back and I may be directed when I should have coached. And I do this for a living. And I think recognizing that for each of us and for those individuals inside our organization, like great coaching is a career-long journey. The beautiful part about that is I get to wake up every day and I get to make a choice. Again, some days I don't choose well, but I get to make a different choice maybe the next day. And I get to make a different choice the day after that. And I start to build an awareness around, well, what does great coaching look like for me? And how does it serve those around me? So delighted that you chose to spend time with us. If we can be helpful in any way, please reach out. You'll see Bluepoint's email address is there. My personal email address is there as well. We do offer, if for those organizations that may be interested, we have a Leader as Coach workshop that helps build leader-like coaches inside the organization. HCI, again, our sister organization, has a coaching certification called Coaching for Engagement and Performance, which it's really, really great. It looks at it from three lenses. The first is, how do I build my own coaching skills? The second lens is, as an HR professional, how do I build the coaching skills of leaders inside my organization? And the third is, how do I build a coach-like culture? So similar to the cadence of today, the certification really equips you with tools and skills and resources to utilize those inside your organization. And as well, we do have a wonderful team at Bluepoint of external coaches who have worked with leaders all over the globe in all sorts of organizations one-on-one. So if external coaching is a lever that your organization is looking to pull, certainly we would welcome a conversation. Again, if there's anything we can do to help, please reach out. Happy to serve in any way we can. I would also like to invite you to our third and final part of the webinar series, and that's strategies for combating change fatigue inside organizations. It's on August 13th. And the reason why I started with that research from Gardner in the employee willingness to support change is coaching is a lens to look at it. And then August 13th, we'll continue that conversation. What are some of the other levers I can pull inside organizations to impact that that low percentage of employee willingness to support the change? So grateful for you joining us. I'm going to pass it back over to Wanika, who's going to close us out.
Joan, thank you so much for your enriching presentation. Just a reminder to HCI members, today's webcast has been approved for HRCI and SHRM credit, as well as for HCI recertification. Your credits for attending this webcast will soon show up in your My HCI profile under the transcript tab. While you're there, don't forget to check out hci.org for even more insights, as well as information on our certifications, virtual conferences, premium membership, and more. I'd like to say one more thank you to our presenter today and to the good people at Bluepoint Leadership Development. And I'd like to also thank you, our webcast viewer. Thanks for spending an hour with us. We'll see you next time.